as the world quiets and the stars begin to shimmer in the velvet sky. Let your mind drift to a time when empires rose like the sun over the vast deserts and rugged mountains of ancient Persia. Tonight, we embark on a journey through the sands of time, tracing the rise and fall of one of history's greatest civilizations, the Persian Empire. This is not just a tale of kings and conquests, but a story of human ambition, ingenuity, and the fleeting nature of power, woven into the fabric of a land where poetry, art, and dreams flourished. Picture yourself standing on the windswept plains of ancient Iran, where the air carries whispers of forgotten battles, royal decrees, and the songs of poets whose words still echo through the ages. This video is crafted to lull you into a restful sleep, with a gentle, immersive narration that carries you through the centuries, as if you're walking the halls of Persepolis or gazing at the flames of a Zoroastrian fire temple. The Persian Empire, vast and radiant, stretched from the Indus River to the shores of the Mediterranean, uniting diverse peoples under a single banner. From the visionary rule of Cyrus the Great to the opulent courts of Darius and the final days of Xerxes, this is a story of triumph, tragedy, and the eternal quest for legacy. As you listen, let the weight of the day slip away, replaced by the soothing rhythm of history unfolding. Whether you're here to learn, to relax, or simply to drift off into dreams, this tale is for you. I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Share in the comments the city or country you call home, and what time it is as you settle in for this journey. Perhaps you're curled up under a blanket in New York at midnight, or watching the dawn break in Tokyo. Wherever you are, let's travel back together to a world long past, where empires rose and fell under the same stars that shine above you now. Hello, my name is Sherry, and welcome to my channel. So let's begin. In the cradle of the ancient world, where the sun casts long shadows over the rugged Iranian plateau, a people stirred, their lives woven into the rhythm of the land. Long before the Persian Empire stretched its arms across continents, the tribes of this vast region roamed as nomads, their tents pitched beneath skies that seemed to whisper secrets of eternity. These were the early Iranians, a hardy folk whose stories were sung by firelight, their voices mingling with the wind that swept through the Zagros mountains. Picture a landscape of stark beauty. Rolling hills dusted with wildflowers, rivers carving paths through stone, and the distant peaks standing like silent sentinels. Here, in this untamed wilderness, the seeds of a great civilization were sown, though none could have foreseen the empire that would rise from these humble beginnings. The Iranian Plateau, a vast expanse stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Persian Gulf, was a crossroads of cultures even in its earliest days. Tribes such as the Medes and the Persians, kin in language and spirit, shared this land with others, nomads, farmers, and traders who moved like tides across the steppe. Their lives were shaped by the land's demands, the scorching summers, the bitter winters, and the constant need to seek water and pasture. Yet, within this struggle, there was ingenuity. They tamed horses, mastered the art of weaving, and crafted tools from bronze, their hands shaping a future they could scarcely imagine. Their gods, too, were born of this land, deities of fire and sky, revered in rituals that sought to harmonize the chaos of existence. Zoroastrianism, with its sacred flames and reverence for truth, was beginning to take root. Its teachings whispered among the tribes, a faint promise of order in a world of flux. The Persians, one of many tribes, were not yet the masters of this land. They lived in the shadow of the Medes, a powerful people who had begun to forge a kingdom in the north. The Medes, with their fortified cities and skilled warriors, seemed destined to dominate. Yet, the Persians, dwelling in the region of Parsa, modern-day Fars, were a people of quiet resilience. Their chiefs led with wisdom, their clans bound by loyalty, and their hearts stirred by dreams of something greater. They were not a people of grand palaces or towering monuments, not yet. Their homes were simple, their lives tethered to the cycles of the seasons. But beneath this simplicity lay a spark, a vision that would soon ignite the world. Imagine a young Persian boy lying on a woven rug beneath a starlit sky, listening to his grandfather recount tales of heroes and gods. The boy's eyes, wide with wonder, trace the constellations as the old man speaks of a time when their people would rise, when their name would echo across distant lands. Such stories were not mere fables. They were the threads of a destiny being woven. The Persians were learning, observing, and adapting, drawing from the cultures that brushed against their borders: Mesopotamians, Elamites, and the distant echoes of Sumerian wisdom. Trade routes carried not only goods but ideas, and the Persians were quick to listen, their minds as open as the plains they roamed. By the 7th century BCE, the Iranian plateau was a tapestry of tribes, each with its own customs, yet united by a shared heritage. The Persians, though not yet ascendant, were poised on the edge of greatness. Their language, Old Persian, was taking shape, its words carved into the future like inscriptions on stone. Their leaders, men of courage and cunning, were beginning to dream beyond the horizon. Among them, a figure was emerging, a man whose name would become legend: Cyrus, son of Cambyses, a scion of the Achaemenid clan. His birth, shrouded in tales of prophecy and divine favor, marked the turning of a tide. The Persians, long overlooked, were about to step into the light. But what drove these people to transcend their nomadic roots? Was it the land itself, its harsh beauty forging a spirit of endurance? Or was it the whispers of ambition, the yearning to unite a fractured world under a single banner? As the tribes gathered around their fires, as the stars wheeled overhead, the stage was being set for an empire that would redefine the ancient world. The dawn of the Persian Empire was not a sudden blaze, but a slow kindling, a fire that would soon burn bright enough to illuminate the ages. And yet, as we linger in this moment, before the rise of kings and the clash of armies, a question lingers like a breeze across the plateau. What dreams must a people share to build an empire that outlasts the stars? In the heart of the Persian homeland, where the plains of Parsa stretched beneath a boundless sky, a child was born whose name would echo through the corridors of time. Cyrus, son of Cambyses, entered the world around 600 BCE, not in a palace adorned with gold, but in the modest embrace of a tribal chieftain's family. The Achaemenid clan, to which he belonged, was one of many vying for influence among the Persian tribes, yet destiny had marked this boy for greatness. As you listen, imagine a young Cyrus standing on a windswept hill, his dark eyes fixed on the horizon, where the mountains met the heavens. The air was thick with the scent of dust and wild thyme, and in his heart burned a vision that would reshape the ancient world. This is the story of Cyrus the Great, the man who forged an empire not through fear alone, but through a revolutionary spirit of wisdom, tolerance, and ambition. The tales of Cyrus's early years are woven with myth, as if the gods themselves conspired to herald his rise. One legend, whispered among the tribes, tells of a prophecy that foretold his greatness, a prophecy so potent that the Median king, Astyages, sought to end the boy's life. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, Astyages, fearing a dream that Cyrus would overthrow him, ordered the infant abandoned in the wilderness. But fate, as it often does, intervened. A shepherd found the child, raising him as his own, and Cyrus grew strong among the hills, his spirit tempered by the rugged beauty of Parsa. Whether truth or fable, these stories paint a picture of a man destined to defy the odds, a leader whose life seemed touched by the divine. By the time Cyrus reached manhood, the Persian tribes were restless under the yoke of the Medes, their northern kin who had forged a powerful kingdom under Astyages. The Medes were formidable, their cities like Ecbatana gleaming with wealth and might. Yet their rule was heavy, their demands burdensome. Cyrus, now a leader among the Persians, saw an opportunity where others saw only submission. With a charisma that drew men to his side and a mind sharpened by years of observation, he rallied the tribes. Picture him standing before a gathering of warriors, his voice steady yet impassioned, urging them to dream of a world where they were not subjects, but masters. His words were not of conquest alone, but of unity, a vision of a realm where diverse peoples could stand as one. Around 550 BCE, Cyrus struck. The rebellion against the Medes was swift and audacious, a storm that swept through the plateau. With cunning strategy and fierce determination, he led his forces against Ecbatana, the Median capital. The battles were brutal, the stakes immense, yet Cyrus's leadership was unmatched. He did not merely seek to destroy, he sought to absorb, to transform. When Astyages fell, Cyrus spared his life, a gesture that stunned a world accustomed to the cruelty of victors. This act of mercy was no mere whim. It was the cornerstone of a philosophy that would define his empire. By integrating the Medes into his fold, Cyrus laid the foundation for a new kind of kingdom, one that stretched beyond tribal loyalties. With the Medes subdued, Cyrus turned his gaze outward. The kingdom of Lydia, ruled by the fabulously wealthy King Croesus, lay to the west, its capital Sardis a beacon of opulence. Croesus, confident in his riches and the prophecy of the oracle at Delphi, challenged Cyrus. The clash that followed was a test of wills, a dance of armies across the Anatolian plains. Cyrus, with his cavalry thundering like a storm, outmaneuvered the Lydians. When Sardis fell in 546 BCE, Cyrus again showed restraint, sparing Croesus and integrating Lydia into his growing dominion. The tales of his mercy spread, drawing allies as readily as his sword drew victories. Next came Babylon, the ancient city of Mesopotamia, its walls towering and its gates legendary. In 539 BCE, Cyrus marched on this jewel of the ancient world. The Babylonian king, Nabonidus, was unpopular, his people weary of his neglect. Cyrus, ever the strategist, exploited this discontent. His forces diverted the Euphrates River, allowing his army to march through its dry bed into the city, a feat as ingenious as it was bold. When Babylon fell, Cyrus did not plunder or raze. Instead, he freed the captives, including the Jews exiled from Jerusalem, allowing them to return and rebuild their temple. This act, recorded in the Hebrew Bible, earned him a reverence that transcended borders, a legacy of compassion rare among conquerors. Cyrus's empire, now spanning from Anatolia to Mesopotamia, was unlike any before it. He ruled not as a tyrant, but as a father to his subjects, respecting their customs, their gods, their ways of life. His decrees, carved into clay and stone, spoke of justice and unity, earning him the title of great even in his lifetime. Yet, as his empire grew, so did the challenges. The vastness of his realm, the diversity of its peoples, demanded a vision beyond conquest. How would Cyrus bind this tapestry of nations together? As the sun set over Persepolis, its foundations just beginning to rise, a question hung in the air, as heavy as the dust of the battlefield. Could one man's dream hold an empire together, or would it crumble under its own weight? Imagine a world where empires were stitched together not just by swords and decrees, but by the pulse of movement, by roads that wound like rivers through mountains and plains, carrying the lifeblood of a civilization. Under Cyrus the Great, the Persian Empire was no mere patchwork of conquered lands. It was a living, breathing entity, its far-flung cities bound by ingenuity and ambition. As the sun rose over the Iranian plateau, casting golden light across the dust-worn trails, Cyrus envisioned a network that would unite his vast dominion. This was the birth of the Royal Road, a marvel of ancient engineering that stretched over 1,600 miles, from the shimmering palaces of Susa to the bustling markets of Sardis. Tonight, let's walk this ancient path, where couriers rode with the speed of the wind, where traders carried spices and silk, and where the dreams of an empire flowed like a mighty current. The Royal Road was not merely a path of stone and earth. It was the spine of the Achaemenid Empire, a testament to Persian foresight. Picture a caravan moving slowly under a blazing sun, camels laden with goods from distant lands, emeralds from Egypt, lapis lazuli from the mountains of Bactria, and cedarwood from the forests of Lebanon. Along the road, way stations stood like oases, their shaded courtyards offering rest to weary travelers. These stations, known as chaparkhane, were spaced a day's journey apart, each manned by keepers who provided fresh horses and provisions. The couriers of the empire, the Paradazes, were its swiftest messengers, riding day and night to carry the king's words. Their speed was legendary. Herodotus, the Greek historian, marveled that neither snow nor rain could slow them, a phrase that echoes even in modern times. This network was born of necessity. The empire, sprawling from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea, was a tapestry of peoples, Medes, Lydians, Babylonians, and countless others, each with their own tongues, gods, and customs. To govern such diversity, Cyrus and his successors needed more than armies. They needed connection. The royal road was the answer, a thread that wove together the empire's heart and its farthest reaches. Merchants from Babylon could trade with artisans in Lydia, while tax collectors carried gold to the treasury in Susa. Ideas, too, traveled these paths. Zoroastrian priests shared their teachings, and scribes bore tablets inscribed with the cuneiform script, preserving the empire's laws and stories. But the royal road was only one part of a greater system. The Persians mastered the art of infrastructure, building bridges that spanned raging rivers and canals that tamed the arid plains. In Mesopotamia, they restored ancient irrigation systems, turning barren lands into fields of wheat and barley. Their engineers, with a precision that rivaled the stars, carved roads through mountains and laid stone pathways across deserts. These works were not just practical, they were symbols of a civilization that saw itself as eternal, a realm where order triumphed over chaos. Imagine a Persian satrap, a governor of a distant province, receiving a sealed scroll from the king, its wax bearing the royal seal. The message, carried hundreds of miles in days, spoke of unity, of a shared purpose under the great king's rule. The empire's veins extended beyond roads. The Persians developed a postal system so efficient it became the envy of the ancient world. Relay stations ensured that messages could travel faster than any army, binding the empire's provinces in a web of communication. This system allowed Cyrus to govern with a flexibility that baffled his rivals. A rebellion in Egypt could be addressed before it spread. A famine in Bactria relieved with grain from the Fertile Crescent. The empire was not a monolith, but a living organism, its parts working in harmony. The royal road carried not just goods and messages, but trust, the belief that the king's justice could reach even the farthest village. Yet this marvel of connectivity was not without its challenges. Bandits roamed the wilder stretches, and the upkeep of way stations strained local resources. The diversity of the empire, its greatest strength, was also a source of tension. A merchant in Sardis might resent taxes sent to Susa, while a nomad in Sogdiana cared little for the king's grand vision. Cyrus, wise as he was, knew that roads alone could not hold an empire together. His successors would need to match his vision with their own, to ensure that the empire's veins did not falter. As the couriers rode through the night, their horses' hooves pounding the earth, the empire stood at a crossroads of its own. The foundations were laid, the roads built, but could this vast network endure the weight of ambition? As the stars gleam above the royal road, casting their light on travelers resting by flickering fires, a question lingers in the cool night air. How long can a king's dream bind a world so vast, when the horizon stretches ever farther? As the Persian Empire stretched its golden arms across the ancient world, a new figure stepped into the shadow of Cyrus the Great's towering legacy. Cambyses II, his son, inherited a realm that gleamed with promise, its borders stretching from the mountains of Anatolia to the rivers of Mesopotamia. Yet the young king's heart burned with a restless fire, a need to prove himself worthy of his father's crown. Picture a man standing on the balcony of a palace in Susa, his gaze fixed on the distant sands of Egypt, where the Nile flowed like a ribbon of life through an endless desert. Egypt, ancient and proud, was a prize unlike any other, a land of gods and pharaohs, its pyramids casting long shadows over a civilization older than memory. This is the story of Cambyses II and his audacious campaign to conquer Egypt, a tale of ambition, triumph, and the whispers of madness that haunted his reign. Cambyses ascended the throne around 530 BCE, a young man shaped by the grandeur of his father's achievements. The empire was vast, its roads bustling with traders and couriers, its treasuries overflowing with the spoils of Lydia and Babylon. Yet Egypt remained beyond Persia's grasp, a kingdom ruled by Pharaoh Amasis II, whose wealth and navy rivaled the might of the East. To Cambyses, Egypt was not just a conquest, it was a challenge to his destiny. The Persians, still a young empire, needed to prove their dominion was no fleeting dream. As he gathered his generals in the torchlit halls of his court, their voices echoing off stone carved with lion motifs, Cambyses laid plans for a campaign that would test the limits of his power. The journey to Egypt was a trial of endurance. The Persian army, a vast host of spearmen, archers, and cavalry, marched across the Sinai Desert, where the sun scorched the earth and water was a fleeting hope. Cambyses, ever strategic, secured an alliance with the Arab tribes of the region, who provided guides and precious water supplies. Imagine the scene: a line of soldiers stretching across the dunes, their armor glinting under a relentless sun, while Bedouin scouts led the way, their robes billowing in the wind. The march was grueling, yet the promise of Egypt's riches drove them forward. In 525 BCE, they reached the Nile Delta, where the Egyptian army awaited at Pelusium, a fortress city guarding the gateway to the land of the pharaohs. The Battle of Pelusium was a clash of wills as much as swords. Legend tells of a cunning ploy. Cambyses, knowing the Egyptians revered cats as sacred, ordered his soldiers to paint feline images on their shields and release cats onto the battlefield. The Egyptians, hesitant to harm their sacred animals, faltered, and the Persians seized the advantage. Whether truth or tale, the victory was decisive. Pelusium fell, and with it, the path to Memphis, Egypt's ancient capital, lay open. Cambyses marched onward, his banners fluttering in the humid air of the Nile. Memphis surrendered, and Pharaoh Psamtik III, Amasis's successor, was captured. The Persian king, now master of Egypt, stood before the temples of Ptah and Amun, their towering statues gazing down as if to judge the new conqueror. Yet Cambyses's triumph was not without shadows. Unlike his father, whose mercy won hearts, Cambyses's rule in Egypt was marked by controversy. Stories, perhaps exaggerated by Greek historians like Herodotus, paint him as erratic, even cruel. He was said to have mocked Egyptian gods, desecrating temples and slaying the sacred Apis bull, an act that horrified his new subjects. Was this the work of a mad king, as his detractors claimed, or the calculated moves of a ruler seeking to break Egypt's spirit? The truth lies buried in the sands, but the whispers of his actions spread, sowing unease. Cambyses, far from home, faced the challenge of ruling a people whose traditions were as ancient as the pyramids themselves. His ambitions did not end with Egypt. Cambyses dreamed of further conquests: to the south, the kingdom of Nubia; to the west, the oasis of Siwa, home to the oracle of Amun. Yet these campaigns faltered. A march into Nubia was thwarted by the harsh desert, and an expedition to Siwa ended in disaster when a sandstorm swallowed an entire army, leaving only whispers of their fate. These failures weighed heavily on Cambyses, whose court was now rife with rumors of discontent. Back in Persia, his brother Bardia, or perhaps an impostor claiming his name, stirred rebellion, challenging the king's grip on the throne. As Cambyses prepared to return home, his heart heavy with the burdens of empire, tragedy struck. In 522 BCE, while marching through Syria, he suffered a wound, some say accidental, others a divine punishment, and died, his dreams of eternal glory unfulfilled. The empire he had expanded now teetered on the edge of chaos, its future uncertain. As the Nile flowed quietly under the stars, carrying the echoes of Egypt's ancient gods, a question hung over the Persian realm: who could inherit the mantle of Cyrus and hold together a world stretched thin by ambition? As the Persian Empire reeled from the death of Cambyses II, the vast dominion forged by Cyrus teetered on the edge of collapse. The year was 522 BCE, and whispers of rebellion stirred in the east, where a man claiming to be Bardia, Cyrus's son, challenged the throne. Yet, from the shadows of this chaos emerged a figure whose vision would not only save the empire, but elevate it to heights undreamed of. Darius, a nobleman of the Achaemenid line, stepped into the flickering torchlight of history, his resolve as unyielding as the mountains of Parsa. Picture him riding across the plains, his cloak billowing in the wind, his eyes fixed on a future where the empire would stand as a monument to order and glory. This is the story of Darius I, known as the Great, who built not just an empire but a legacy carved in stone and ambition, with the magnificent city of Persepolis as its beating heart. Darius was no king by birthright, but a distant cousin of Cambyses, a spear-bearer in the royal guard with a keen mind and a warrior's courage. The tale of his rise is one of intrigue and audacity. When rumors spread that the man claiming to be Bardia was an impostor, a magus named Gaumata, Darius acted swiftly. With a small band of loyal nobles, he stormed the fortress of Sikyovati, where the usurper held court. The details are shrouded in legend, but the Behistun inscription, carved high on a cliff in western Iran, tells Darius's version. A daring assassination, a clash of swords in the dawn light, and the restoration of Achaemenid rule. Whether Gaumata was a false Bardia or a rightful heir, Darius's victory was absolute. By 522 BCE, he wore the crown, but the empire was far from secure. Rebellions flared like wildfires across the provinces. From Babylon to Media, from Elam to Parthia, satraps and pretenders challenged the new king's authority. Darius, undaunted, waged a relentless campaign to restore order. Picture the dust of battle rising over the plains, the clash of bronze spears, and the thunder of hooves as Darius's loyalists crushed one revolt after another. The Behistun inscription, a towering testament to his triumphs, lists 19 battles fought in a single year, a testament to his tenacity. He was not merely a warrior, he was a strategist, dispatching trusted generals to quell distant uprisings while he consolidated power in the heartland. By 521 BCE, the empire was his, its provinces subdued, its enemies silenced. With the realm secure, Darius turned to a grander task, building an empire that would endure. He was no mere conqueror, content with spoils. He was an architect of systems, a weaver of order. His reforms transformed the Persian Empire into a marvel of governance. He divided the realm into satrapies, each governed by a satrap, or governor, answerable to the king. These satraps were watched by the king's eyes and ears, spies who ensured loyalty across the vast distances. Taxes were standardized, flowing into the royal treasury in gold and silver, weighed with meticulous care. Darius introduced a new coin, the daric, its golden gleam a symbol of Persian wealth. These coins, stamped with the image of a crowned archer, circulated from the Indus to the Aegean, binding the empire's economy. Yet, Darius's greatest monument was Persepolis, a city born of his vision. Begun around 518 BCE, it rose from the plains of Parsa, its terraces gleaming with polished stone, its columns soaring like the cedars of Lebanon. Imagine walking its grand staircases, where envoys from every corner of the empire, Medes with flowing robes, Egyptians with linen kilts, Bactrians bearing turquoise, climbed to offer tribute. The Apadana, the great audience hall, shimmered with gold and lapis, its reliefs depicting the empire's diversity and intricate detail. Persepolis was not just a palace. It was a statement, a declaration that Persia was the center of the world. Darius, standing atop its terraces, could survey a realm that stretched from the Nile to the steppes of Central Asia, a dominion unmatched in history. Darius's genius lay in his ability to balance power with pragmatism. He honored local customs, allowing subject peoples to worship their gods and speak their tongues, yet he ensured their loyalty through a network of roads, garrisons, and administrators. The royal road, expanded under his reign, pulsed with life, carrying messages and goods with a speed that awed the ancient world. He dug canals, including one linking the Nile to the Red Sea, reviving trade routes dormant since the pharaohs. His court, a kaleidoscope of cultures, buzzed with scribes, poets, and engineers, their work shaping an empire that felt eternal. But eternity is a fragile dream. As Darius gazed from Persepolis, his thoughts turned to the west, where the Greek city-states, small yet defiant, stirred unrest. The Ionian Greeks, under Persian rule, chafed at their satraps, their whispers of rebellion growing louder. Could Darius, the architect of greatness, extend his vision to conquer these distant shores, or would the empire's vastness become its undoing? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Persepolis in a golden glow, a shadow of uncertainty lingered, like a whisper on the wind. How far could one man's ambitions stretch before the world pushed back? In the heart of the Achaemenid Empire, where the palaces of Persepolis gleamed under a cerulean sky, Darius, I wove a tapestry of governance that held together a realm vast as the heavens. Picture a bustling court, where scribes etched cuneiform onto clay tablets, their styluses dancing in the flicker of oil lamps. Envoys from distant lands, Scythians with braided hair, Indians bearing ivory, Greeks in flowing tunics, presented their tribute, their voices mingling in a symphony of languages. The Persian Empire, stretching from the sands of Egypt to the steppes of Sogdiana, was a mosaic of peoples, each with their own gods, laws, and dreams. Yet, under Darius's steady hand, this diversity became the empire's strength, bound by a system so ingenious it seemed to defy the chaos of human ambition. Tonight, let us wander the corridors of Persian power, exploring the art of governance that made this empire not just vast, but enduring. Darius understood that an empire of such scale could not be ruled by force alone. The sword could conquer, but only wisdom could sustain. At the core of his vision was the satrapy system, a network of provinces that gave the empire structure. Each satrapy, governed by a satrap, often a trusted noble or royal kin, was a miniature kingdom with its own courts, treasuries, and armies. Yet these governors were not kings. They answered to Darius, their loyalty ensured by a delicate balance of trust and oversight. The king's eyes and ears, a cadre of inspectors, roamed the empire, their reports carried swiftly along the royal road to the king's ear. Imagine a satrap in Babylon, his palace adorned with glazed tiles, receiving a sealed scroll from Susa, its words a reminder that the great king's gaze was ever watchful. This system was not merely administrative, it was a philosophy. Darius, building on Cyrus's legacy, embraced the diversity of his subjects. In Egypt, the people worshipped Amun and Osiris. In Lydia, they prayed to Artemis. In Bactria, they honored their ancient fire gods. Darius allowed them their rituals, their temples, their laws, so long as they paid tribute and swore allegiance. This tolerance was revolutionary in a world where conquerors often imposed their will with fire and blood. The Behistun inscription, towering above the cliffs, declared Darius's mission: to rule with justice, to protect the weak, to honor the truth. His laws, inscribed in multiple languages, Old Persian, Elamite, Akkadian, spoke to all his peoples, a testament to his belief that an empire could be a chorus, not a single voice. The empire's bureaucracy was a marvel of precision. Scribes, trained in the ancient scripts of Mesopotamia, recorded taxes, trade, and royal decrees. Gold and silver flowed into the treasury, measured in talents and stored in vaults beneath Persepolis. The daric, Darius's gold coin, became a symbol of stability, its value trusted from the Nile to the Indus. Taxes were not merely coin. They were grain from Egypt, horses from Media, ivory from India, a reflection of the empire's diversity. To manage this wealth, Darius appointed treasurers and auditors, their ledgers a mirror of the empire's pulse. Imagine a scribe in Ecbatana, his fingers stained with ink, calculating the tribute of a distant satrapy, his work ensuring the roads were maintained, the armies fed, the palaces adorned. Communication was the empire's lifeblood. The royal road, with its relay stations, allowed messages to travel with breathtaking speed. A courier could carry a royal decree from Susa to Sardis in a week, a feat that left foreign observers in awe. This network enabled Darius to respond to crises, a rebellion in Parthia, a famine in Susa, with a swiftness that bound the empire tighter. Yet it was not just messages that traveled, it was culture. Persian nobles learned Egyptian astronomy, while Greek architects studied the columns of Persepolis. Zoroastrian priests, their sacred fires burning, shared their teachings, their chants echoing in temples from Babylon to Bactria. The empire was a crossroads, a place where ideas met and mingled, shaping a civilization that was more than the sum of its parts. But this harmony was not without strain. Satraps, entrusted with power, sometimes harbored ambitions of their own. Local nobles whispered of independence, their loyalty tested by distance and temptation. Darius countered with garrisons, strategic marriages, and a network of spies that ensured no corner of the empire was beyond his reach. Yet even his wisdom could not foresee every challenge. In the west, the Ionian Greeks, subjects of the empire grew restless, their cities buzzing with talk of freedom. Their discontent, like a spark in dry grass, threatened to ignite a conflict that would test the empire's strength. As Darius stood in the Apadana, gazing at the reliefs of his subject nations, he knew that governance was a delicate dance. One misstep could unravel the tapestry he had woven. As the torches burned low in Persepolis, casting shadows on the walls where lions and bulls stood carved in stone, a question lingered in the quiet night. Could the Persian way, so carefully crafted, withstand the storms gathering on the horizon? As the Persian Empire stood at the zenith of its glory, its palaces gleaming under the sun and its roads alive with the hum of 1,000 cultures, a shadow stirred in the west. Across the shimmering waters of the Aegean Sea, the Greek city-states, small, fractious, and fiercely independent, began to chafe under the weight of Persian influence. Picture a coastal city in Ionia, its whitewashed walls kissed by the sea breeze, where merchants and poets whispered of freedom in the agora. These Greek cities, nestled along the western edge of Anatolia, were subjects of the empire, their satraps appointed by Darius I. Yet their hearts beat with a defiant rhythm, a longing for autonomy that would spark a conflict to echo through the ages. Tonight, let us sail across the Aegean to witness the first flames of the Greco-Persian Wars, a clash that began with a rebellion and culminated in a battle that would shape the fate of empires. By 499 BCE, the Ionian Greeks, descendants of settlers from the Greek mainland, had grown weary of Persian rule. Their cities, Miletus, Ephesus, Samos, were jewels of trade and culture, their harbors bustling with ships laden with olive oil, wine, and ideas. Yet the taxes imposed by Persian satraps and the presence of garrisons stifled their spirit. The spark came in Miletus, where Aristagoras, a local tyrant, rallied his people against the empire. His motives were tangled, part ambition, part desperation, for he faced disgrace after a failed campaign against Naxos. With fiery words, he cast off his Persian allegiance, urging the Ionians to rise. Picture him standing in the marketplace, his voice rising above the crash of waves, calling for a revolt that would shake the foundations of Darius's realm. The Ionian revolt spread like wildfire. City after city cast out their Persian overseers, their citizens dreaming of a world free from the great king's shadow. But Aristagoras knew the Ionians could not stand alone. He sailed to the Greek mainland, seeking allies among the city-states. In Sparta, he was met with cold refusal, the warrior king Cleomenes wary of distant wars. But in Athens, a city pulsing with the new ideals of democracy, he found a willing ear. The Athenians, bound by kinship to the Ionians and wary of Persian expansion, sent 20 ships, joined by 5 from Eretria. These vessels, their prows cutting through the wine-dark sea, carried not just warriors but a challenge to the might of Persia. The rebellion struck a bold blow in 498 BCE, when the Ionians, bolstered by their Greek allies, marched on Sardis, the former Lydian capital and a key Persian stronghold. The city fell, its acropolis engulfed in flames, though whether by accident or intent remains a mystery. The fire, licking the sky, sent a message to Darius in far-off Persepolis. The Greeks would not kneel. But the empire's response was swift and merciless. Persian forces, led by loyal satraps, rallied to crush the revolt. The Ionians, brave but disorganized, faltered against the disciplined ranks of Persian infantry and cavalry. By 494 BCE, the revolt's heart, Miletus, was besieged. The city's walls crumbled under Persian assault, its people enslaved, its once proud harbor silenced. The rebellion was quashed, but its embers glowed still, carried across the sea to Athens. Darius, his patience worn thin, turned his gaze to the Greek mainland. The burning of Sardis was an insult, a wound to the empire's pride. He vowed to punish Athens and Eretria, to bring these defiant cities under his heel. In 490 BCE, he dispatched a fleet across the Aegean, led by his generals Datis and Artaphorns. The Persian armada, its sails blotting the horizon, landed first at Eretria, which fell after a brief siege. Then the fleet turned to Attica, landing at the plain of Marathon, a flat expanse perfect for Persian cavalry. The Athenians, outnumbered and alone, Sparta delayed by a religious festival, marched to meet them, led by the strategist Miltiades. Picture the scene: Greek hoplites, their bronze armor gleaming, forming a phalanx on the Marathon plain, facing a Persian host vast as the sea. The Battle of Marathon was a clash of worlds. The Persians, with their archers and cavalry, relied on mobility and numbers. The Greeks, with their heavy armor and tight formation, bet on discipline and courage. In a daring move, Miltiades strengthened his flanks, luring the Persian center forward before enveloping it. The Greeks charged, their spears lowered, their cries rising above the dust. The Persians, caught off guard, broke and fled to their ships. By day's end, the plain was littered with the fallen, and Athens stood victorious. The legend of the runner Phidippides, racing 26 miles to Athens with news of victory, was born, a tale that would inspire generations. Darius, stung by defeat, planned a greater invasion, but fate intervened. In 486 BCE, he died, leaving the throne to his son Xerxes. The Battle of Marathon, though a Persian loss, was but a prelude. The Greeks had bloodied the empire's nose, and the stage was set for a war that would shake the world. As the waves lapped the shores of Marathon, carrying the echoes of battle, a question hung heavy in the air. Could the Greeks, divided and defiant, withstand the full might of an empire bent on vengeance? As the Persian Empire mourned the passing of Darius I, a new king ascended the throne, his eyes alight with the fire of ambition. Xerxes I, son of Darius, inherited a realm that stretched from the sun-scorched sands of Egypt to the wind-swept steppes of Central Asia. Yet, the sting of defeat at Marathon lingered, a wound to the empire's pride that demanded retribution. Picture Xerxes standing atop the terraces of Persepolis, his royal robes catching the breeze, gazing westward toward the Greek city-states that dared to defy his father's will. The year was 486 BCE, and the young king resolved to crush Athens and her allies, to bring the fractious Greeks under the Persian yoke. This is the story of Xerxes's grand invasion of Greece, a campaign of unprecedented scale, where the earth trembled beneath the march of millions and the seas churned under a forest of sails. Xerxes's ambition was matched only by his audacity. To conquer Greece, he envisioned a campaign that would dwarf all others, a spectacle to awe the world. For years, the empire's resources were marshaled, its treasuries emptied, its forests felled, its people summoned. From every corner of the realm, soldiers gathered. Medes with their curved swords, Assyrians with bronze-tipped spears, Bactrians on swift horses, and Egyptians wielding sickle-shaped blades. Herodotus, the Greek historian, claimed the army numbered in the millions, a sea of humanity that drank rivers dry. Though likely exaggerated, the force was staggering, a testament to Persia's might. Imagine the campfires stretching across the horizon, their smoke rising like a prayer to Ahura Mazda, the Zoroastrian god of light. The greatest challenge lay in crossing the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Asia from Europe. Xerxes ordered a marvel of engineering, a pontoon bridge formed of boats lashed together with ropes of flax and papyrus, stretching over a mile across the turbulent waters. Picture the scene: Persian engineers toiling under the sun, their hands weaving a path where none existed, while the king watched from a throne of gold. Storms battered the first bridge, but Xerxes, undeterred, ordered another, and by 480 BCE, his army crossed, the planks groaning under the weight of men and horses. To the Greeks, this was an act of hubris, a defiance of the gods who ruled the seas. To Xerxes, it was a declaration: no barrier could stand in Persia's way. The march through Thrace and Macedon was a procession of power. The army, accompanied by a vast fleet, moved like a tide, its supply lines stretching back to Asia. Local tribes, awed or coerced, swore allegiance, their chieftains offering earth and water as tokens of submission. Yet as the Persians approached the heart of Greece, resistance hardened. The Greek city-states, led by Athens and Sparta, formed a fragile alliance, their differences set aside in the face of annihilation. At Thermopylae, a narrow pass where mountains met the sea, the Greeks made their stand. Here, King Leonidas of Sparta, with 300 Spartans and a small allied force, faced Xerxes's host. The pass was a choke point, its cliffs and waves a natural fortress. The Battle of Thermopylae, fought in 480 BCE, was a clash of endurance and will. For 2 days the Greeks held, their phalanxes unbreakable, their spears reaping a bloody toll. The Persians, unused to such confined warfare, faltered against the disciplined ranks. Imagine Leonidas, his bronze helmet gleaming, shouting defiance as arrows darkened the sky. Xerxes, watching from a throne atop the cliffs, grew impatient. Then betrayal struck. A Greek traitor, Ephialtes, revealed a mountain path, allowing Persian forces to outflank the defenders. On the 3rd day, Leonidas, knowing the end was near, sent most of his allies away, standing with his 300 Spartans in a final act of sacrifice. They fell, but their stand became legend, a spark that ignited Greek resolve. With Thermopylae breached, the path to central Greece lay open. Xerxes's army poured southward, the fleet shadowing their advance. Thebes surrendered, but Athens, defiant, prepared for the storm. The Athenians, guided by the strategist Themistocles, evacuated their city, trusting their fate to their navy. As Xerxes's forces marched, the question hung heavy. Could the Greeks, divided by pride and politics, unite to face an empire that seemed unstoppable? As the Persian army camped beneath the stars, the Acropolis of Athens looming in the distance, a whisper of doubt stirred in the night air. What price would victory demand? And could even Xerxes's ambition conquer a people who fought for freedom? As the summer of 480 BCE burned across the Greek mainland, the Persian army under Xerxes I swept southward, an unstoppable tide of men and ambition. The pass of Thermopylae had fallen, its Spartan defenders immortalized in their sacrifice, and now the path to Athens lay open. Picture the scene. A vast host marching through the hills of Attica, their armor glinting under a merciless sun, while behind them, the Persian fleet sailed along the coast, its sails a forest on the wine-dark sea. Athens, the heart of Greek defiance, stood defiant yet vulnerable, its people fleeing to the island of Salamis under the guidance of Themistocles. This is the story of the Persian sack of Athens and the pivotal naval battle that followed, a moment when the fate of Greece, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance as flames and waves shaped the course of history. With Thermopylae behind him, Xerxes moved swiftly. Thebes, a city wavering in its loyalty, surrendered, offering earth and water to the great king. But Athens, proud and unyielding, refused to bend. The Athenians, forewarned by the Delphic oracle's cryptic words, had evacuated their city. Their women and children ferried to safety across the narrow strait to Salamis. The Acropolis, crowned with temples to Athena, stood nearly deserted, its marble gleaming in silent defiance. When Xerxes's army reached Athens, they found a city abandoned but not defeated. Enraged, the king unleashed his wrath. The Persians stormed the Acropolis, where a handful of defenders, priests and old men, made a final stand. They fell, and the sacred hill was set ablaze. Imagine the flames licking the wooden roofs of the Parthenon's predecessor, smoke rising like a dark prayer as the city burned under the weight of Persian vengeance. The sack of Athens was a triumph for Xerxes, a moment to soothe the wound of Marathon. His soldiers looted the city, toppling statues and carrying off treasures, while the king, from a vantage point on a nearby hill, surveyed the destruction. Yet this victory was hollow. The Athenians had not surrendered. They had withdrawn, their hopes pinned on their navy, a fleet of triremes anchored in the narrow waters of Salamis. Themistocles, the Athenian strategist, knew the land was lost but the sea could yet be won. He urged the Greek alliance, Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and others, to stake everything on a naval battle, where the Persians' vast numbers would be their weakness in the confined straits. Xerxes, confident in his fleet's superiority, prepared for the next strike. His navy, a coalition of Phoenician, Egyptian, and Ionian ships, numbered in the hundreds, dwarfing the Greek fleet. He ordered a throne set up on a hill overlooking the Salamis Strait, ready to watch his victory unfold. The Greeks, outnumbered but cunning, baited the Persians into a trap. Themistocles, through a daring ruse, sent a messenger to Xerxes, claiming the Greeks were divided and fleeing. Lured by this deception, the Persian fleet sailed into the narrow waters of Salamis in September 480 BCE, their ships crowded and unwieldy. Picture the chaos, triremes packed tightly, oars clashing, as the Greeks, with their smaller, agile vessels, struck like wolves among sheep. The Battle of Salamis was a maelstrom of wood and bronze. Greek triremes, their rams gleaming, darted through the straits, smashing Persian hulls. The sea churned with wreckage, the cries of drowning men mingling with the crash of waves. Themistocles' strategy worked. The Persians, unable to maneuver, fell into disarray. Phoenician and Ionian ships, loyal to Xerxes but resentful of their subjugation, faltered under Greek assaults. From his throne, Xerxes watched as his fleet crumbled, the sea turning red with the cost of his ambition. The Greeks, united in purpose, fought with a ferocity born of desperation, their victory a testament to strategy over numbers. By day's end, the Persian navy was shattered, its remnants limping back to Asia. Xerxes, shaken but not broken, faced a choice. With winter approaching and his supply lines stretched, he withdrew the bulk of his army, leaving his general Mardonius to hold northern Greece. Athens, though burned, stood as a symbol of resilience, its people returning to rebuild amid the ashes. The victory at Salamis was not the end of the war, but a turning point, a moment when the Greeks glimpsed hope against the empire's might. Xerxes, retreating to Sardis, pondered his next move, his dreams of conquest tempered by the sea's rebuke. As the waves of Salamis grew still, carrying the echoes of battle to distant shores, a question lingered in the smoke-filled air. Could the Greeks, emboldened by their triumph, push back the Persian tide, or would Xerxes' wrath return to claim them all? As the echoes of Salamis faded across the Aegean, the Persian Empire, though stung by defeat, stood resplendent under the rule of Xerxes' eye. The flames that consumed Athens could not dim the brilliance of a civilization that shimmered like gold under the desert sun. From the towering terraces of Persepolis to the bustling markets of Babylon, the Achaemenid realm was a tapestry of cultures, its wealth and creativity unmatched in the ancient world. Picture a grand hall in Susa, its walls adorned with glazed tiles of lions and lotuses, where poets recited verses, artisans carved intricate reliefs, and envoys from distant lands offered tribute. This was the Persian Empire's golden age, a time when art, architecture, and ideas flourished, weaving a legacy that would endure beyond the clash of armies. Tonight, let us wander through this radiant era, where the empire's heart beat with beauty and ambition. The Golden Age, spanning the reigns of Darius I and Xerxes, was not merely a time of conquest but of creation. Persepolis, Darius's masterpiece, stood as the empire's crown jewel. Its Apadana hall, with columns soaring 60 feet, could hold thousands, its staircases carved with scenes of subject nations bearing gifts, gold from Lydia, horses from Armenia, ivory from India. Imagine walking these steps, the stone cool beneath your feet, as reliefs depict warriors and kings in silent procession. The city was a canvas of Persian artistry, its palaces adorned with gold leaf, cedar beams, and precious stones. Craftsmen from across the empire, Egyptians, Greeks, Babylonians, worked side by side, their hands blending styles into a distinctly Persian aesthetic, one that celebrated both power and harmony. Art was not confined to stone. Persian metalwork gleamed with intricate designs, golden rhytons shaped like winged lions, silver bowls etched with floral motifs. Textiles, woven with threads of saffron and indigo, draped the nobility in splendor, their patterns telling stories of gods and heroes. Jewelry, from turquoise earrings to necklaces of lapis lazuli, adorned the courts, each piece a testament to the empire's wealth. Music filled the air, with lyres and flutes accompanying poems that praised the king's justice or mourned the fleeting nature of life. The Avesta, sacred texts of Zoroastrianism, were chanted by priests, their words weaving spirituality into the empire's soul, urging followers to uphold truth and light. Literature, though less preserved than stone, thrived in this era. Scribes recorded royal decrees, histories, and stories on clay and parchment, their words carried across the royal road to distant satrapies. The empire's multilingual nature, Old Persian, Elamite, Akkadian, fostered a rich exchange of ideas. In Babylon, astronomers charted the stars, their calculations influencing Greek and Indian scholars. In Susa, engineers designed aqueducts and gardens, their innovations transforming arid lands into oases. The Hanging Gardens, though perhaps a myth, were attributed to Persian ingenuity, a symbol of a civilization that could make the desert bloom. The empire's cultural vibrancy was matched by its tolerance. Darius and Xerxes, following Cyrus's example, allowed subject peoples to preserve their traditions. In Egypt, temples to Amun were restored. In Jerusalem, the Jewish temple rose anew. This policy was not mere pragmatism, it was a vision of unity, where diverse peoples could thrive under the great king's protection. Festivals like the Nowruz spring celebration brought communities together, their feasts and dances a celebration of shared humanity. Imagine a Nowruz gathering in Ecbatana, where Medes, Persians, and Bactrians shared bread and wine, their laughter echoing under a starlit sky. Yet this golden age was not without its shadows. The Greco-Persian Wars, though a setback, continued to simmer. After Salamis, Xerxes returned to Persia, leaving his general Mardonius to face the Greeks at Plataea in 479 BCE. The Persian defeat there, alongside a naval loss at Mycale, ended the invasion, emboldening the Greeks. Within the empire, the cost of war strained the treasury, and satraps whispered of discontent, their loyalty tested by distance and ambition. Xerxes, once the master of millions, faced the challenge of maintaining an empire stretched thin by its own vastness. His court, though splendid, buzzed with intrigue, as nobles vied for power and influence. The Golden Age was a fleeting moment, a zenith where art and ambition danced in harmony. Persepolis, with its silent stones, stood as a testament to what humanity could achieve when united by a shared vision. Yet, as Xerxes walked its halls, his thoughts must have turned to the future. The empire, for all its glory, was a fragile creation, its strength dependent on the will of one man. As the torches burned low, casting long shadows across the reliefs of tribute-bearers, a question hung in the air, as delicate as a poet's verse. Could this radiant empire, so carefully crafted, withstand the whispers of discord growing within its heart? As the Persian Empire basked in the glow of its golden age, its palaces shimmering with the wealth of nations, a quiet unease began to stir beneath the surface. The grandeur of Persepolis, with its towering columns and intricate reliefs, spoke of a civilization at its peak, yet even the mightiest structures can hide fractures in their foundations. Xerxes I, the great king who had marched across the Hellespont and set Athens aflame, now faced the challenge of holding together a realm vast as the horizon. Picture him in the torchlit halls of Susa, his brow furrowed, as reports of unrest trickled in from distant satrapies. The empire, a tapestry of peoples and cultures, was bound by ambition and ingenuity. But ambition can breed envy, and ingenuity cannot silence whispers of rebellion. This is the story of the cracks that began to form in the Persian Empire, where court intrigues, distant revolts, and the weight of greatness tested the bonds of a once unshakable dominion. The defeat at Salamis and Plataea in 479 BCE, though not fatal, had left scars. The Greek victories emboldened other subject peoples, who saw in the empire's stumble a chance to reclaim their autonomy. In Egypt, where the Nile nourished both crops and pride, the people chafed under Persian rule. The memory of Cambyses's alleged cruelties lingered, and the heavy taxes imposed to fund Xerxes's wars fueled resentment. Around 484 BCE, a revolt erupted in the Delta, led by a local leader named Psamtik IV. The rebellion was swiftly crushed, but it was a warning, a ripple that hinted at deeper currents of discontent. Imagine the scene. Egyptian priests chanting in their ancient temples, their prayers mingling with calls for freedom, while Persian garrisons patrolled the riverbanks, their spears gleaming under a relentless sun. In Babylon, too, the spirit of rebellion stirred. The city, once the jewel of Mesopotamia, had been subdued by Darius after earlier revolts, its great ziggurat dismantled as a symbol of submission. Yet the Babylonians, proud of their ancient heritage, never fully embraced Persian rule. Around 482 BCE, a new uprising flared, led by a man claiming descent from the old Babylonian kings. Xerxes responded with force, his armies marching through the Euphrates Valley to restore order. The city's walls held for a time, but Persian siegecraft prevailed. The aftermath was harsh. Temples were plundered, and the great statue of Marduk, Babylon's patron god, was said to have been melted down, a blow to the city's soul. Xerxes, unlike his father Darius, showed little of Cyrus's mercy, and the memory of his actions sowed seeds of lasting bitterness. Within the heart of the empire, the court itself became a crucible of intrigue. Persepolis and Susa buzzed with nobles, each vying for the king's favor. The royal harem, a labyrinth of ambition, was a breeding ground for plots. Xerxes's queen, Amstress, wielded influence, her will as sharp as a blade. Whispers of conspiracies filled the air, nobles scheming to elevate their sons, satraps hoarding wealth, eunuchs carrying secrets between shadowed chambers. One tale, recorded by Herodotus, speaks of Xerxes's entanglement with his brother's wife, a scandal that sparked betrayal and murder within the royal family. Whether true or embellished, such stories reveal a court where loyalty was a fragile currency, and power could shift with a single whispered word. The empire's vastness, once its strength, now became a burden. The royal road, though a marvel, could not bridge the growing distance between the king and his far-flung provinces. Satraps, entrusted with governing distant lands, grew bold, some ruling as near-independent kings. In Asia Minor, the Ionian cities, though subdued after their revolt, simmered with unrest, their Greek kin across the Aegean fanning the flames. The satrapy system, Darius's genius, required a strong hand to maintain, but Xerxes, distracted by wars and court politics, struggled to match his father's vigilance. The king's eyes and ears, once feared, could not be everywhere, and reports of corruption began to reach the throne. The empire's economy, too, showed signs of strain. The wars against Greece had drained the treasury, and the derrick, though trusted, could not mask the rising cost of maintaining garrisons and roads. Taxes grew heavier, pressing on peoples already weary of Persian demands. In the east, nomadic tribes like the Scythians tested the empire's borders, their raids a constant thorn. Yet even amidst these challenges, the empire endured, its markets bustling, its artisans crafting, its priests chanting to Ahura Mazda. The resilience of Darius's systems held the realm together, but the cracks were widening, each one a whisper of vulnerability. In 465 BCE, tragedy struck. Xerxes, the king who had crossed the Hellespont, was assassinated in his own palace, betrayed by those closest to him. The details are murky, a plot led by a courtier, perhaps with the complicity of his son Artaxerxes. As the empire mourned, a new king ascended, inheriting a throne as splendid as it was precarious. The Golden Age, with its glittering palaces and soaring dreams, was fading, its light dimmed by the shadows of rebellion and betrayal. As the torches flickered in Persepolis, casting long shadows across the reliefs of tribute-bearers, a question hung heavy in the silent night. Could the empire, so vast and so fragile, withstand the weight of its own ambitions, or would the cracks now forming bring it to its knees? In the shadowed halls of Persepolis, where the echoes of Xerxes's assassination lingered like a mournful wind, a new king ascended the throne in 465 BCE. Artaxerxes I, son of Xerxes, stepped into a world of splendor and peril, his crown heavy with the weight of an empire teetering on the edge. Picture him standing before the Apadana's golden reliefs, his youthful face etched with resolve, as envoys from distant satrapies offered their loyalty or their veiled ambitions. The Persian Empire, still vast and radiant, bore the scars of rebellion and defeat, its unity strained by the intrigues that had claimed his father's life. This is the story of Artaxerxes I, a king who sought to mend the cracks in his father's legacy, to restore stability to a realm stretched thin by its own grandeur, and to navigate a world where new threats loomed on the horizon. Artaxerxes inherited an empire that glittered with the achievements of Cyrus, Darius, and Xerxes, but its foundations trembled. The assassination of Xerxes, orchestrated by a courtier named Artabanus and perhaps abetted by royal kin, had shaken the court. Whispers of conspiracy still haunted the palaces of Susa and Persepolis, where nobles and eunuchs watched one another with guarded eyes. Artaxerxes, young and untested, acted swiftly to secure his throne. The conspirators were rooted out, their fates sealed in the quiet of the night. Yet, the act of purging traitors could not erase the deeper unrest that simmered across the empire. From Egypt to Bactria, the peoples of the Achaemenid realm tested the new king's strength, their loyalty fraying like a worn tapestry. The greatest challenge came from Egypt, where the Nile's ancient rhythms fueled a restless spirit. In 460 BCE, a rebellion erupted, led by a Libyan prince named Inaros, backed by the Athenians, who saw in Persia's troubles a chance to weaken their rival. The Greeks, emboldened by their victories at Salamis and Plataea, sent a fleet to the Nile Delta, their triremes slicing through the waters like knives. Imagine the scene. Egyptian rebels and Greek hoplites storming Persian garrisons, their banners raised against the backdrop of palm-lined shores. Artaxerxes dispatched his general Megabyzus, a seasoned commander, to quell the revolt. The fighting was fierce, the Nile stained with the blood of both sides. By 454 BCE, the Persians prevailed, Inaros was captured, and Egypt was brought back under control, but at a cost. The rebellion had exposed the empire's vulnerability, and the Athenian involvement signaled a growing threat from the west. Artaxerxes, learning from his father's failures, sought to stabilize the empire through diplomacy as much as force. In 449 BCE, he negotiated the Peace of Callias with Athens, a fragile truce that ended, for a time, the Greco-Persian conflicts. The agreement allowed Persia to retain its western territories, including Ionia, while the Athenians promised to cease their raids. This was no triumph, but a pragmatic pause, a chance for Artaxerxes to turn inward and strengthen the empire's core. He bolstered the satrapy system, appointing loyal governors and reinforcing the king's eyes and ears to watch for disloyalty. The royal road, still the empire's lifeline, carried his decrees, ensuring that his will reached even the farthest provinces. The king also turned to cultural and religious patronage to unify his realm. He supported the rebuilding of temples, including in Jerusalem, where he granted further aid to the Jewish community, continuing Cyrus's policy of tolerance. Zoroastrianism, the spiritual heartbeat of Persia, flourished under his reign, its priests tending sacred fires in temples from Susa to Sardis. Artaxerxes' court, though less opulent than Xerxes's, was a hub of activity. Scribes recorded histories, artisans crafted silver vessels, and poets wove tales of the empire's glory. Imagine a banquet in Ecbatana, where nobles raised goblets of wine, toasting the king's justice, while musicians played haunting melodies on the lyre, their notes a reminder of a shared heritage. Yet, stability was a fleeting dream. The empire's vastness remained its greatest challenge. Satraps, entrusted with power, sometimes acted as petty kings, their loyalty wavering when the king's gaze turned elsewhere. In Asia Minor, the satrap Megabyzus, hero of the Egyptian campaign, rebelled when Artaxerxes broke a promise to spare Inaros' life. The revolt was quelled, but it underscored the fragility of trust within the empire. In the east, nomadic tribes like the Sakas pressed the borders, their raids a constant drain. The treasury, though still rich, felt the strain of maintaining garrisons and rebuilding after years of war. Artaxerxes, a king of caution rather than conquest, worked tirelessly to hold the empire together. But the effort was like mending a vast tapestry with a single thread. As Artaxerxes aged, his reign brought a measure of calm, but the empire's golden age was fading. The grandeur of Persepolis, though still breathtaking, could not mask the growing sense of unease. The Greeks, now united under Athens's Delian League, grew bolder, their ships patrolling the Aegean with newfound confidence. In the distance, a new power was stirring, Macedon, where a young kingdom watched and waited. As Artaxerxes stood in his palace, the weight of the crown heavy on his brow, a question lingered in the flickering torchlight. Could his careful stewardship preserve the empire's glory, or were the cracks now too deep to mend? As the Persian Empire stood beneath the weight of its own grandeur, its palaces gleaming and its roads alive with the pulse of a vast dominion. A new shadow emerged in the west. The year was 336 BCE, and across the Aegean, in the rugged hills of Macedon, a young king named Alexander ascended the throne, his eyes burning with a vision that would shake the world. Artaxerxes I had passed, leaving the empire to a succession of kings. Artaxerxes II, Artaxerxes III, and now Darius III, each struggling to hold together a realm grown fragile with age. Picture a Persian court in Susa, its air heavy with the scent of myrrh, where nobles whispered of a distant kingdom and a boy king whose ambition rivaled the stars. This is the story of Alexander's rise, the harbinger of the Achaemenid Empire's twilight, whose conquests would sweep across the ancient world like a storm across the plains. Darius III, ascending the throne in 336 BCE, inherited an empire that was still a colossus, its treasuries brimming, its satrapies stretching from Egypt to India. Yet, the cracks that had begun under Xerxes had deepened. Rebellions flared in Egypt and Babylon, and the satraps, once loyal, grew ever bolder, their allegiance wavering in the face of a weakening crown. Darius III, a man of courage but not the brilliance of his namesake Darius I, worked to restore order. He crushed revolts with a heavy hand, reasserting Persian dominance in Egypt and strengthening garrisons along the royal road. But the empire's vastness, once its strength, now made it sluggish, its response to threats slowed by distance and bureaucracy. As Darius stood in the Apadana, gazing at reliefs of tribute-bearers, he could not have foreseen the storm gathering in Macedon. Alexander, barely 20 when he became king, was no ordinary ruler. Tutored by Aristotle, trained in war by his father Philip II, he was a fusion of intellect and audacity. Picture him in Pella, Macedon's capital, his golden hair catching the sunlight, rallying his companions, elite cavalry, with a voice that carried the weight of destiny. Philip had united the Greek city-states under Macedonian hegemony, forging a disciplined army with the phalanx as its backbone. Its long sarissa spears a wall of death. When Philip was assassinated, Alexander inherited this machine of war and a dream to conquer the East. The Persian Empire, to him, was not just a rival but a prize, the greatest challenge for a king who saw himself as Achilles reborn. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed the Hellespont, echoing Xerxes's march a century and a half earlier, but with a smaller, leaner force, some 35,000 men, hardened by years of campaign. His first clash with Persia came at the Granicus River, where he faced a Persian army led by local satraps. The battle was swift and brutal. Alexander, leading from the front, charged across the river, his cavalry shattering the Persian lines. Imagine the chaos. Macedonian lances piercing the air, Persian archers falling back, the river stained with the cost of defiance. The victory was Alexander's, and the Ionian cities, long under Persian rule, began to waver, some opening their gates to the young conqueror. Darius III, roused by this defeat, gathered a vast army, summoning warriors from every corner of the empire, Bactrian horsemen, Median spearmen, Scythian archers. In 333 BCE, at Issus, the two kings met. The battlefield, a narrow coastal plain, favored Alexander's smaller force. Darius, atop a golden chariot, commanded a host that outnumbered the Macedonians, yet Alexander's genius prevailed. He outmaneuvered the Persians, striking their flanks with his cavalry while the phalanx held the center. The Persian lines broke, and Darius fled, leaving his family, his mother, wife, and children in Alexander's hands. Picture the aftermath. A Persian camp littered with treasures, Alexander sparing Darius's family with a chivalry that stunned his foes, a gesture that echoed Cyrus's mercy centuries before. The victory at Issus opened the Levant. City after city, Tyre, Gaza, Jerusalem, fell to Alexander, his path to Egypt unbarred. In 331 BCE, he was crowned pharaoh, the Nile's ancient gods bowing to a new master. Darius, desperate, offered peace, ceding half the empire, but Alexander refused, his eyes fixed on Persepolis. The final blow came at Gaugamela, a vast plain where Darius chose his ground, his army bolstered by war elephants and scythed chariots. Yet Alexander's tactics, feints, charges, and relentless pressure shattered the Persian host. Darius fled again, his empire crumbling. As Alexander marched eastward, the question was no longer if, but when the Achaemenid throne would fall. The empire, once a beacon of order, now faltered, its satraps defecting, its cities surrendering. As Alexander approached the heart of Persia, the palaces of Susa and Persepolis loomed, their wealth a siren's call. Darius, a king without a kingdom, fled to the mountains, his fate uncertain. As the Macedonian army camped under a starlit sky, the fires of their conquests glowing on the horizon, a question hung heavy in the air. Could the empire that had once spanned the world withstand the ambition of one man, or was its end now written in the dust of Gaugamela? As the dust of Gaugamela settled in 331 BCE, the Persian Empire, once a colossus striding across continents, stood on the brink of collapse. Alexander of Macedon, the young king whose ambition burned brighter than the sun, pressed eastward, his army a relentless tide sweeping through the heart of Persia. Darius III, the last Achaemenid king, fled into the mountains, his throne reduced to a memory, his empire unraveling like a tapestry torn by the wind. Picture the plains of Parsa, where the great city of Persepolis rose, its terraces gleaming under a twilight sky, its columns casting long shadows across reliefs of tribute-bearers. This was the empire's beating heart, a symbol of its glory, now facing the shadow of conquest. Tonight, let us walk the final steps of the Achaemenid dynasty, as Persepolis falls and a flame consumes the legacy of centuries. Alexander's march to Persepolis was a journey through the soul of Persia. After Gaugamela, he seized Babylon, its gates opening without a fight, its people weary of war. Susa followed, its treasuries yielding gold and silver enough to dazzle the Macedonian army. But Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, was the true prize, a city of stone and splendor, built by Darius I to proclaim the empire's eternity. As Alexander approached, the satrap of Parsa, Ariobarzanes, made a desperate stand at the Persian gates, a narrow pass in the Zagros Mountains. Imagine the scene. Macedonian phalanxes clashing against Persian defenders, rocks tumbling from cliffs, the air thick with dust and cries. Ariobarzanes fought bravely, but Alexander, ever the tactician, found a mountain path to outflank the defenders. The pass fell, and the road to Persepolis lay open. In early 330 BCE, Alexander entered the city. Picture him standing before the Apadana, its vast halls silent, its reliefs depicting a world now slipping from Persian hands. The treasuries of Persepolis held wealth unimaginable, gold derricks, silver talents, jewels from India and Egypt. The Macedonians, hardened by years of campaign, marveled at the opulence. Cedar beams inlaid with gold, tapestries woven with threads of saffron, vessels of lapis and turquoise. Alexander, perhaps awed, perhaps calculating, allowed his men to plunder, their hands stripping the city of its riches. The palaces, once alive with the hum of envoys and poets, echoed with the clatter of looted treasure, a requiem for Achaemenid glory. Then came the fire. One night, as the Macedonians feasted, flames engulfed the palaces. Some say it was an accident, sparked by drunken revelry. Others, like the historian Arrian, claim Alexander ordered it, a deliberate act to signal the end of Persian rule. Picture the blaze. Flames leaping from the palace of Xerxes, consuming wooden roofs, blackening stone columns, the air thick with the scent of burning cedar. The fire was more than destruction. It was a symbol, a pyre for an empire that had once united half the world. The people of Parsa, watching from the plains, must have wept, their dreams of greatness reduced to ash under a starlit sky. Darius III, meanwhile, fled further east, seeking refuge in Bactria. But his fate was sealed. Betrayed by his own satrap Bessus, he was captured and killed, his body left in a cart, a king without a crown. Alexander, learning of his rival's death, covered the body with his cloak, granting the last Achaemenid the honor of a royal burial. With Darius gone, the empire had no king, its satrapies fracturing as governors surrendered or declared themselves rulers. Alexander pressed on, conquering the eastern provinces, Sogdiana, Bactria, India, claiming the mantle of the great king for himself. Yet he did not destroy the Persian system. He adopted it, blending Macedonian vigor with Achaemenid tradition, a fusion that would shape his empire. The fall of Persepolis marked the end of the Achaemenid dynasty, but not its spirit. The city's ruins, even in flames, stood as a testament to a civilization that had woven together nations. Its art, its roads, its ideas lived on, carried by Alexander's conquests to new corners of the world. The fire that consumed Persepolis was not an end, but a transformation, its ashes scattering to seed new empires. Yet, as Alexander stood amid the smoldering ruins, his ambition unchecked, a question lingered in the smoke-filled air. Could a conqueror so relentless build a legacy to rival the one he had burned? Or would his own empire crumble as swiftly as the flames that claimed Persepolis? As the flames of Persepolis faded into embers, their smoke curling into the night sky of 330 BCE, the Achaemenid Empire drew its final breath. Alexander's conquests had shattered the dynasty that once spanned 3 continents, its palaces reduced to ruins, its last king a memory in the dust. Yet, as the Macedonian conqueror marched eastward, carrying the spoils of Persia to the ends of the known world, the spirit of the empire endured, its legacy woven into the fabric of history like threads of gold in a tapestry. Picture a quiet evening in modern-day Iran, where the stones of Persepolis still stand, whispering tales of Cyrus, Darius, and Xerxes to those who listen. This is the story of the Persian Empire's enduring impact, a civilization that shaped the ancient world and left echoes that resonate even today, under the same stars that once shone over its glory. The Achaemenid Empire was more than a realm of conquest. It was a crucible of ideas, a bridge between East and West. Cyrus the Great's vision of tolerance, allowing subject peoples to keep their gods and customs, set a precedent that rippled through time. Imagine a Jewish scribe in Jerusalem, rebuilding the temple with Persian gold, or an Egyptian priest tending his shrine under the watchful eye of a satrap who honored Amun. This policy of inclusion, refined by Darius, created a model of governance that influenced later empires, Seleucid, Roman, even Ottoman. The idea that diversity could be a strength, not a weakness, was a Persian gift to the world, a legacy that whispers in modern ideals of pluralism. The royal road, stretching over 1,600 miles, was more than a path. It was a lifeline that connected cultures. Merchants carried silk from India, spices from Arabia, and ideas from Greece, fostering a cultural exchange that shaped the ancient world. The Aramaic script, used by Persian scribes, became a lingua franca, its letters spreading from Egypt to India, a precursor to modern alphabets. Zoroastrianism, with its emphasis on truth and light, influenced religious thought, its dualism echoing in later faiths like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Picture a Zoroastrian priest tending a sacred fire, its glow a symbol of a philosophy that sought to harmonize the human and the divine, a spark that still burns in the rituals of modern Parsis. Persian art and architecture left an indelible mark. The grand columns of Persepolis, with their lotus capitals, inspired builders from Athens to India. The reliefs of tribute-bearers, carved with meticulous detail, celebrated a world united. Their style echoed in the palaces of later dynasties like the Sassanids. Persian gardens, with their shaded walkways and flowing fountains, became a model for paradise, their design influencing Islamic architecture and beyond. Imagine strolling through a garden in Shiraz today, its roses blooming as they did in Darius's time, a living testament to a civilization that saw beauty as a reflection of order. The empire's administrative genius, its satrapies, standardized taxes, and Daric coins set a standard for governance. The Romans, centuries later, adopted similar systems, their provinces and roads owing a debt to Persian ingenuity. The Daric, with its golden purity, stabilized trade across continents, a precursor to modern currencies. Even Alexander, the empire's conqueror, adopted its systems, appointing satraps and preserving Persian bureaucracy to govern his vast realm. The fusion of Macedonian and Persian traditions under Alexander's successors, the Seleucids, carried Persian ideas to new lands, blending them with Greek philosophy and art in a Hellenistic world. Yet the legacy is not only in stone or systems. The Persian Empire gave the world stories, tales of Cyrus's mercy, Xerxes's ambition, Darius's vision. These were preserved by Greek historians like Herodotus, whose works, though biased, ensured Persia's place in the annals of history. The Shahnameh, the Persian epic written centuries later by Ferdowsi, drew on Achaemenid legends, weaving them into Iran's cultural identity. Even today, the names of Persepolis and Cyrus evoke pride, their stories told in classrooms and fireside gatherings across Iran and beyond. The empire's fall was not an erasure but a transformation. Its ideas, carried by Alexander's conquests, seeded new civilizations. The Parthians and Sassanids, Persia's heirs, built on Achaemenid foundations, their empires a continuation of the same spirit. In the modern world, the Persian legacy lives in Iran's cultural heritage, in the poetry of Rumi, in the architecture of Isfahan, in the resilience of a people who trace their roots to the plains of Parsa. As you drift towards sleep, imagine standing among the ruins of Persepolis, the wind carrying whispers of a time when one empire united half the world. What dreams sustained such a vision, and what dreams might rise from its ashes?